Scott here again on Flip That Script. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about confronting your toxic family members about their harmful behavior and about evaluating your relationships with them and that whole context of seeing yourself as the CEO of your own life. I just wanted to expand on this a little bit more before I start to go into some other topics that regard the options of low contact and no contact and some other aspects of this whole issue and regarding ways to move forward and to get out of those dynamics and what all that might entail and what the aftermath of what confronting them and evaluating their place in your life. Actually, more in this video, we're going to be talking about that. But there's other options and the aftermath in the longer run will be discussed later on in this series. A few things to keep in mind. One is because of the very nature of these toxic relationships, it's certainly up to you, so I'm not going to tell you don't have a conversation about it on the phone and don't talk about it with them in person. But my advice would be to stray away from that and communicate by email or letter. You may choose to put a lot of grievances in the communication, which is what I did. If you do that, think of it as you're stating your truth. But there's a few things to keep in mind. Number one is because they're going to be so reactive, defensive, and likely become more abusive by being triggered in the face of you confronting them. That's why I more recommend that it be email or a traditional letter. A lot of experts, like I said in the previous video, more recommend that you keep it short and to the point, that the relationship is toxic and harmful to you, or you've been unhappy in the relationship for quite some time, and that also very highly recommended because of how triggering this is going to be for them no matter what. Definitely recommend taking a breather of, I'd say, at least a few months. And then this is regardless of what your long-term decisions might be. As far as talking about you being the CEO of your own life and evaluating these relationships, what that really means is you get to decide how big of a part they play in your life. That means how much you choose to disclose with them. Now, with toxic family members and even just toxic people in general, unfortunately, that type of closeness and emotional intimacy that you might have with other people in your life is really not a realistic possibility with people that have these kinds of issues. So that kind of relates back to the radical acceptance. But just be aware that it's actually good not to disclose too much to them, even if you're going to have a future relationship with them and at least some minimal superficial contact. The whole gray rock thing is about recognizing the fact that they like to dig for information, or if you're just offering it so freely, like you're idealistic and you want them to get you and to understand you and to encourage you and do things that toxic family members just don't do. They like to use information that they're able to obtain either by you freely offering it or by willing to answer detailed questions, which puts you on the defensive and all that stuff. It's really good not to share that stuff. That's the reason that a lot of experts will say to keep your communication when you confront them and are taking a break from them. That maybe you do keep it simple. Reason being, and this is really sad but true, if you're saying and giving too much detail that, let's say especially when you X, Y, and Z, or talk about X, Y, and Z, or keep trying to shame me about my weight. Just an example. But whatever it might be, in my case, it would be, whenever you talk poorly of my late wife, the more that you actually give specifics, the more they're actually going to be trying to discern, aha, so it's working. So now I know the best ways to hurt them. Awful, but true. So when evaluating their place in your life, I like this whole concept of being the CEO of your own life. Because if you think about it, people really do occupy different positions in your life. And I'm not talking about titles. This is my best friend and confidant. This is my jokester and good time friend. This is my friend that I get together with occasionally, and we don't talk about things, too deep or whatever. I mean, you have friends that you have varying degrees of closeness with and varying degrees of contact with. So, with your toxic family members, if you've been trying to make things work and you want to have more frequent contact and you want to have more emotional intimacy, it just might not be in the cards. It might be just too dysfunctional. You might be asking them to do things that are that's beyond their, I've talked about this before, but that they don't have the bandwidth for. Toxic people don't have much of a bandwidth for empathy. You can't make them feel for you. You can't make them proud of you. You can't make them happy or sad for you based on what you might be experiencing in your life. So, the evaluation period and taking that break, to me, is so important. I had initially taken a year break, and like I had mentioned, it was 8 or 9 months in that I decided to write a letter and consider that after the year up that I was going to give my father a chance. It's so important that you keep in mind that even after an evaluation period and taking a break, if you decide that you're going to have some sort of contact with them, it is so important that you come to understand and accept their limitations. Now, the really hard part about this is in accepting their limitations. One of their biggest limitations is that they're still going to continue to see you as the problem. And as legitimate and valid as I'm sure that your grievances are, even if you keep your communication when you confront them about the problems in the relationship, even when you keep it simple, you certainly know of all the painful instances in which you were disappointed and hurt and harmed by their behavior. But because of their inability to self-reflect and their strong commitment to needing to see themselves in a positive light, despite how awful they can be, which is the whole reason that you're reading and learning about toxic people and toxic family on YouTube. They are going to remain committed to misunderstanding you and doing all the defensive things that toxic people do if you ever give them criticism. In this case, it's well earned because they're being abusive. That seems like something that you should be able to have a grievance with. But this is the sad and simple truth of toxic family members. You might find that at least stating your truth, even if you keep it simple and taking the breather that I highly recommend, both in and of themselves should be very empowering for you for finally taking some kind of action, and the taking the breather itself definitely sends a very strong message of you being unhappy with what's been going on. So that's kind of wraps up what I wanted to talk about today, but was just to give you a little more information, some more food for thought, and a larger context within which to view what I talked about in the previous video.